Hello, world. This is Hello Chaos, the podcast about the ups and downs, ins and outs, highlights and low points of entrepreneurship, where we have folks who are at various stages of entrepreneurial journey or in that ecosystem to talk about their experiences and also some lessons that hopefully you can take with you as you make your next moves. I am Jennifer Oladipo.
AKA what?
Jeno.
And I'm Jennifer Sutton, AKA JJ to all my friends and family, which you are. And today we have Lelia King with Build Carolina. And thank you, Lelia, for coming on and talking to us about everything Build Carolina and your journey. Because you've had a good journey too.
I've had a great journey.
A part of this ecosystem that we're all about.
Yes, I'm excited to be here.
So tell us just the quick 30,000 of Build Carolina, and also you can pimp your new news that you just recently announced, and we could start there.
Okay. Build Carolina is a nonprofit organization that's all about thinking about our entire tech talent ecosystem. Is how we talk about that. So we have some training programs, and the fun news that we had shared last week is that we have a new registered apprenticeship for software engineers in South Carolina, which is very fun news.
Which means federally registered.
Federally registered apprenticeship, yeah. So for software developers, it's this really cool model, kind of a co-op model where folks who are kind of coming out of education get to do a little bit of that work study. So they get some of that experience on the job.
So is it a placement program?
They do get placed.
Okay.
Yes. So Build Carolina, we have 3 programs, and I can get into all 3. That one is called Develop Carolina.
Oh, okay.
They all have their fun, different South Carolina-based names that are. It's a little confusing. We're also still new. We're about to hit 5 years.
Okay, I was going to ask you how many years.
Yeah.
Okay.
About to hit 5 years. So always.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you guys were a branch off of another, or was that correct? Is that correct?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Our
Okay.
story is that we picked up where another company ended.
Yeah.
So that was the Iron Yard.
That's right.
The Iron Yard, which was headquartered in Greenville, started here, was another great founder startup journey story.
And it was an accelerator for those in the audience who don't know.
Yeah, it was an accelerator, and they started seeing this success with businesses that were doing well, and then they realized they needed to hire, and we need to hire developers. We need to hire people to create this technology that we've been talking about, we've been building, and they couldn't find enough talent locally, and so rather than try and fix this huge issue, we can't find enough talent. They said, well, why don't we just get someone to come in here and teach an accelerated training for these skills?
And that was where the code school came into play? Okay.
Exactly right. So they that's what they did. They brought somebody in, and that person just taught software development skills, not a whole degree program, but just an accelerated training. And that became a code school.
Okay.
And so that code school grew and grew. And that's where I worked as the director of communications. And then in late 2017, the entire company closed. So it was an exit. But what happened is in South Carolina, there was a gap. Once that company was finished, we didn't have other code schools really here. Whereas in a lot of these other markets, there was other activity going on. And so in that gap, we stood up a nonprofit and just said, we still believe in this mission. This is still a need. We've got a ton of companies here that have this particular talent need. We're not trying to scale this company huge. We want to fill this gap. And so that is really the birth of Build Carolina.
Okay. So you guys kind of bridge the gap or where academia kind of stops, sort of.
Yeah.
And to the recruitment of full-time employment.
Right.
In a way. Okay.
Yeah, my team always laughs at me because I use my ecosystem hand when I'm describing this.
So for those that just listen to audio, you'll need to check out the video portion of this podcast.
This big sweeping round movement.
My round,
open palm.
full circle ecosystem hand. And because when I describe it, that's what I always started to do. Of course, then I had to get on Canva, which is a scary thing sometimes when I get on Canva, to create some kind of visual to describe when we talk about this talent ecosystem. It starts, at K-12, yes, and it includes all, kind of the traditional educational pathways that we know about, but we also really thought about, like, how do people get into technology? If they don't do it in K-12, then maybe they do it in higher ed, but maybe they do it in some of these non-traditional ways, like code schools is one example. But what about these other groups of people, returning citizens, military veterans, like caregivers returning to work? That's actually a great place for some of those folks, but there's not an obvious place for them to like come into the ecosystem, and yet this is a place that's ripe for quick training, accelerated training. It's very much like it's kind of an old model of like apprenticeship. It's skills-based training but it's applied to this high-tech space. So jobs that are paid really well, talent needs, like we need folks who have these skills. So at Build Carolina, we started as a code school, right? We started with like, okay, well, we're just going to fill this one gap that we know about and create a school where adults can come for 3 months and they learn how to code and then they go get jobs, and that's the thing.
Right.
Kind of easy to describe that.
Yeah.
But then we sort of took a step back and started talking to folks and realized like, oh, there's actually a lot more gaps here if we're looking at we're curious people, right? That's the founder story, is like, if you're not satisfied with...
It's work in progress, right?
Yes. Yes, that's right.
We are.
Yes, work in progress, and just not being satisfied with not having a good answer to why.
Yeah.
So we started asking some questions like, well, why don't we have enough talent in this?
Yeah.
Like, why does South Carolina not have more folks who have this skill? Why not? Like, and so the nonprofit, the organization started kind of like rising over just the one program and starting to ask these questions about the full ecosystem. And I could talk all day, so you will have to interrupt me because I get really excited about
this is good.
Well, because our audience is founders, and so
Right.
I mean, these are questions that as people try to build their companies are going to start asking themselves.
Workforce
at some
development,
point.
right?
Yeah, that's right.
Labor
Yeah.
and the labor shortage,
Right. And
is-
it's not like the first day that I said yes to doing this, which is a risk.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was new and we created it. And what it is today is not what I thought it was going to be back then. So kind of that whole responding to market need, and as the market changes, we also adapt and change. And like, we made this conscious decision to be adaptable and to kind of almost create this business in such a way that we could respond to needs and we could fill gaps, and so that's been really interesting to see us grow in that way.
How do you balance that? Because like the nature of just even what you're in, you have to be responsive, right? It's it's technology, so it's changing. It's
well, and
fast.
also you've got a lot of power universities and colleges here in South Carolina that you would think this would be a natural program that they should have already created as an apprenticeship to keep people here versus graduating and then saying, I'm out of here, I'm going to go get some experience in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, so that kind of, is part of what I was going to ask was, how do you balance that need to be responsive in a pretty fast-paced, part of the economy with the need for that kind of stability, and I guess it's not quite credibility, but I'm not quite sure what the word I'm looking for is. But the thing that you would find in a more formal, in academia or something like that when you're trying to educate. So providing that kind of, I guess, continuity, stability, accessibility at the same time as being responsive and we've got a completely different look from what I thought we'd have 5 years ago.
Right. It's technology. Like, because we're in this industry that is very fast-paced, always changing, always moving quickly, That is, it's almost like that's the culture of that industry. So we have sort of adopted that same culture. And, so when I think about us as an organization, it's because ultimately like the end customer, the end client of ours, we're training all these students, and then we're training these folks to go in the workforce, to go into jobs. But ultimately it's, in service of our companies.
Right.
So ultimately it's the companies that are kind of our client.
Because you want to produce a good product for them.
That's right.
At the end of the day.
We are trying to be responsive so that we are creating, programs and solutions that are filling the needs of our companies. And I bring that up because if you think about like our entire philosophy it's not competitive. It's not, for-profit versus nonprofit education. It's not traditional pathways versus non-traditional. It's, guess what? We need all of them and more. We need all of them. We need more students to go into those existing STEM-related computer science programs that we have.
So you're even trying to get some of the entry, like not just when you go to college. It's really how do you get people enthused about that K through 8th first.
Starting as early as possible.
Okay.
And there's good momentum. Even this morning I was at a computer science and STEM summit with K-12 about technology is the future. How are we equipping our K-12 teachers in the classrooms to be able to inspire students?
Yeah.
How do we get more folks into that ecosystem?
It's just curious. It surprised me that we're struggling with getting students excited about technology when I feel like they're saturated. They're saturated with it, and they are more nimble and agile with technology than my kids are. I mean, it's it's a second nature. It's not even
right.
Is it? Yeah.
But you're helping to create and empower the makers, right? Because the kids, I mean, really, they're consumers for the most part. Right. All of us really are.
Well, I'm just scared. I'm like, is it the students? They have that desire, but we've got a shape to go. Hey, this is a pathway or a job that you could have. Is that the challenge, or is it because they're so oversaturated with technology? They don't even think of it as something they want to pursue.
Right. It's a little of both.
Is it okay?
The challenge, it's a little of both. So in a lot of cases, it is, I didn't realize that this thing that I enjoy doing, or that seems, these
TikTok.
digital natives, TikTok, right? Not even thinking about the fact that someone's job is thinking about like that application's interface and how you as a person are working with that technology. So some of it is just exposure to that industry.
Yeah.
And of course, it's not just apps, and it's not just computer science. It's not just web development. Computer science is sort of this foundation that can go in so many directions.
Oh, yeah.
So many directions. So some of it is that. Some of it is folks don't see themselves in those roles. In, pop culture, there's still, even, 2022, right? It's still this persona of nerds in hoodies in the basement, coding in the screen, looking at the screen and not really having personal interaction, when in reality, not only is that not really true today,
right,
but it's certainly not true in the future.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we do in our training programs, soft skills, communication
I was going to ask you about,
because you got to know not just how to build software, and not just understand the process, which is a huge part of it, of course. How do you build a product? What is that entire product life cycle? But also, how do you work with a team of people?
Right. How do you communicate?
Like
an adult.
That's right. So that's a huge
peer-to-peer interaction.
Effectively, yeah.
So I think there's a lot that's unique to us because we're responding to this particular industry, whereas a lot of other industries, now they're all tech now, right?
Yeah.
What industry is not tech?
Yeah.
But so many of them have been around for so long, and so there's kind of these solidified pathways into, if you want to be a nurse, this is the path.
Right.
And in technology, it's more like this. If you
not
think
as
about it
clear.
as a path, right? It's there's a whole forest in front of you and the end result you want, and you just got to figure out your way through that for
and
us.
it's difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
It is. So the story goes, we started a code school. That's what we thought we were doing. And then we started working with the state, with our Department of Commerce, and ended up with this statewide program for free coding education called SC Codes. And
Is
then
that still around too?
That's still
Yeah,
around
you
too.
can go in there, mess around.
Yeah.
SC Codes, anybody in the state, it's free. It's kind of that exposure piece that we were talking about. Like, by the way, it's not just K-12, it's also adults
That's what's, yeah.
who just don't know what we don't know, right?
Right.
And so that program started, and so then we, as an organization, also started growing and figuring out like who we were as this sort of umbrella to several programs in the tech education space, but not just one kind of thing. And then now we've added this third program, which is the apprenticeship, because again, we kept traveling and we kept talking to employers and hearing the same thing over and over. And so realizing that that's a gap, and that gap in particular was between education and work. And really, like, they would say, you know, I don't mind if someone's coming from a code school or from a traditional 4-year strong degree program. There's still a gap, like, when we get them, that we have to still do a lot of training for them and really just handhold for a while. And so we just started saying, what can we do to help that? And that's kind of how a lot of our programs start, is us just saying, like, well,
Find a solution.
what can we do to help?
Yeah.
How do we find a solution? Is this something that exists that we can just help amplify or pull partners together? Or do we need to create something new?
Right.
Yeah, one of the things when we had our call, you know, about what we might chat about that I thought was really interesting was you talking about how much as the, you know, head of the organization and with your team, you spend in that just thinking about that thinking time, you know, I think with
Problem solving.
and thinking about solutions and possibilities. And, you know, it seems like, your organization is not for profit, but I mean, it's 100% entrepreneurial, and whatever your path is, it's a really busy path, and you're just moving forward, and there are numbers, and there are clients, and there are customers, and there are.
It's a business.
Yeah, it's a business.
It's still
and
a business.
so, like, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about how you carve out that time and kind of your process for, like, okay, we need to just think about what's going on in the world and how we're responding.
It's kind of a challenge that I think about a lot more I've thought about a lot more this year. So in our 4th year, you know, as we've finally we've launched now 3 programs, and we're sort of in the space of we're running those programs, and that is kind of, you know, solid, you know, like we have a not just a path, but like a format for that. We have a process for those. And it's like just now I've had enough margin to even think about the fact that for us in our kind of funding structure, oftentimes we're funded to run a program, and we're not funded to think about how to do these things. But yet we still have to do that. We spend a lot and so I've started almost naming that space as lab time.
Oh, okay.
You know, like when we're even just the beginning of that, like in conversations, on calls, in meetings, like asking these questions, thinking about it, and then almost coming up with proposals, coming up with potential new program ideas.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's been helpful to just even name that time as kind of separate from just running programs. And, you know, we're still not funded to do that, but we've figured out a way to create enough margin, enough space to at least acknowledge that we spend some of our time doing that, and that we have to do that in order to keep growing and keep moving forward.
How is your organization funded?
Good question. Since I brought that up.
Yeah.
We're funded in a couple different ways. So right now, each program is funded specifically. So the code school is funded, it's a traditional code school, so it is tuition money or scholarships. So we've got several companies that fund scholarships, which is awesome, and we want more of that. And we'd love to support that, with public dollars too. We just haven't gotten there yet. SC Codes is primarily grant funded through public dollars. And then Develop Carolina as this registered apprenticeship, that's our most diversely funded program, where there's some public dollars, especially to stand that up, to pilot it. And then we've added in this registered designation, which gives it this kind of additional validation from the federal government, and a few dollars to come from federal government as well. But it's also funded through the companies that it's
kind of like a sponsorship.
Yeah, it is a sponsorship. That's the formal word they like to use. And the model there is we, Build Carolina, we're sort of the sponsor. It's a group model. So there are several companies that host apprentices, but then we are sort of shouldering the burden of the training, the curriculum, the soft skills. So it's kind of it's 2 days a week with us and with kind of a cohort of learners, and then 3 days a week embedded in a company. So the companies pay into that a little bit too. So that one's a little bit more diverse. And again, like what I have been thinking about as a founder, as a leader, is there's a gap here in our organization where, like, what about that lab time? What about that margin? That is kind of like creative time. That
incubation yourself.
Incubation. That is like R&D. Got so excited I went all the way over my microphone, all the way over and above the microphone.
Producer back there, he'll keep us straight if there's an issue, so you must sound fine.
Is there I know that you guys are fairly new, but is there a state or a market that you're going, there's an organization that's like us in blah, and they do this, and they're amazing, and we aspire to be them? Or are you guys kind of carving your own way?
There are a couple of pieces from other organizations that we see familiarity. We see a little bit of a mirror reflection in. But there are only a couple of them, and no one's doing it exactly like we're doing it. And I was telling Jennifer the other day that of course, is hard because,
there's no roadmap.
There's no roadmap.
There is no roadmap.
Or there's no one to go, hey, we're kind of like that, but not really.
And that's the same story with a lot of the people we work with, because there's also not a great, solid, one standard roadmap to go into tech. And so we sort of resonate with that. But we're nonprofit. We're kind of still a startup. We're at this intersection with technology and education. And so we don't really sit in any of those perfectly.
Right.
But we're kind of part of all of them.
Yeah.
So it's really fun because we get to push boundaries.
You're the three-legged stool.
Yeah, that's right.
You're the seat, bringing all of them together.
How do you, identify what are good partnerships and opportunities? Because you can go with that diversity of service areas. You could go in a lot of different directions. So I think there are other folks of all entrepreneurial sorts who are thinking about okay, how do I identify either good partnerships or good, I guess they're not your customers, but it's more of a partnership with the clients and things that you service.
Yeah. I don't want to sound trite in saying this, but for us, figuring out what our values were kind of upfront has, I think, helped us figure out the answer to that question. Because it's like at the end of the day, we say we value opening up opportunities and reducing barriers. We say we value agility and we value diversity. And so when we're looking at partners and when we're looking at, opportunities for us, it has to align with that.
Yeah.
And because, this is the fun part of building a company.
Yeah. I was going to say, you had to go through basically entrepreneur journey yourself to go, what's our mission and vision?
What's our mission and vision?
What's our objective? And the value statement so that,
that's right.
Okay.
And everybody does that, but not everybody does that with their heart, for real.
Right.
And I feel for us, we've been really lucky that every person we've hired is 100% at the center of all those values. And so we all kind of have this we all come from different perspectives and different, experiences, but we have a similar lens
Right.
through which we look at opportunities, partnerships, funders, even funding. It's like, do you want to get funding from an organization or group that really does not align? Because that'll it's the mission creep thing, right?
Yeah.
It'll
Right.
kind of pull you in a direction that may or may not be in that focus, in that lane.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's been really important for our story that we took time. Now for us, it was, when I think about the timeline, it was kind of year 3 or getting into year 3 that we stepped away, took time and did our mission, vision, values, and did a full, look and investment into
Your
that.
own come to Jesus meeting.
It was multiple meetings.
Yeah.
Multiple meetings.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, so that was year 3. Is it because the first couple of years you were finding yourself being pulled, or you had to pivot a couple of times and you were like,
figuring it out.
whoa, you're just figuring it out.
Figuring it out.
Kind of
And-
understanding the landscape and
Yeah, and again, like when we first started, I thought, well, we're just sort of picking up this thing that we already know how to do, and we're just doing it as a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
But we kind of knew the formula. And so it didn't seem like we needed to spend as much time on that.
right.
And then with the kind of the addition of additional partners, additional programs, and then sort of seeing this bigger picture and
Yeah.
seeing ourselves differently and our organization differently, it became clear, like, we need to decide,
What path?
like, if you want to come at it from the very corporate lens, what are our KPIs? How are we measuring
Right.
our outcomes, our success? If it's not just through folks graduating from this one program, but it's this bigger picture. So what does that mean for us? And it just forced us to ask a lot of those hard questions, forced us to really get a little more buttoned up with our board and our structures and our processes. And so I'm trying to think back to the original question of sort of like, how do you evaluate partnerships and that kind of thing. And I really think for us, as cheesy as that may sound, that's really true.
Yeah.
That we evaluate it like kind of in our value system and in our mission. We can come back to our
It's
mission.
in that box.
And if it fits in that box, if it's they too care about these things, and
Yeah.
ultimately it's about creating more pathways and lowering barriers or removing barriers and just this kind of idea of like opening up this ecosystem. And whether or not that is, somebody who's been doing it forever, or systems that are in place forever, or whether that's somebody that's new like us, like, it matters more that we match with kind of our mission.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that.
Have you found that you need to differentiate from other places where people might be going to either find the education or find the talent? Either like, we're not a staffing agency,
But like other online schools and stuff
yeah,
like that.
just
coding
how do you I guess keep your positioning? Like, you've got it
Right.
clarified for yourself. How do you clarify that for other folks?
For other folks. So with each program, so they kind of meet people in different places. And some of it is just kind of helping to educate and encourage people to really understand their learning style and what they need, and also to really hone in on their goals. And because there are programs for each type and for each person wherever they are on that path. And whether or not it's one of our programs, we'd rather talk to someone who wants to get into tech, who wants to be part of that ecosystem. I'm doing my circular
That
hand
ecosystem
again.
swirl
Ecosystem
now down on the
swirl.
table.
The swirl. Now it's on the table, right? If they want to get in it, though, we'd rather talk to them and help meet them where they are and help them figure out what that path is for them, whether or not it's one of our programs. But so take the Code School, for example. So Carolina Code School, it's in person, it's accelerated. We call it an immersive experience. It's almost that model where if, say, you want to learn Spanish, you can get the Duolingo app, and there's about 12,000 paths you can choose, or you can move to, Spain for 3 months and live with a family and only speak Spanish. And those are very different paths. Or you can you can go take a 4-year path and
Right.
learn it and learn all the history and the grammar. And so we sort of equate this code school model. It's like if you're the person who wants to learn Spanish and you're going to go move and do the 3 months.
Okay.
And so the outcome is not exactly the same, right? They're not going to know all the history, all the grammar, all the things that you would get in a 4-year college. But that's where we're like, it's not competitive. It's what is your goal?
Right.
You already know you want to do this, and you just need this one skill.
The application of it.
And then you
Okay.
can go work, and that's what you know. And there's these companies, these jobs that are open. We have a lot of jobs open right now in technology. Guys, a lot of jobs in technology. So that's the thing. It's like the ecosystem it's ripe. There is need for all kinds. And so I think the differentiation is in helping people determine what kind of program, training program, educational pathway is right for them. And a lot of people have never really thought about that before.
No.
Right? And
No.
I am guilty of that too. Like, I don't think I would be a founder, and I still have a hard time calling myself that, or entrepreneur, if I hadn't had a little break in my own path when I was new to working. So I was forced into entrepreneurship a little bit in the 2008 economic downturn.
That's right. Yeah.
So I lost my job and sort of decided I'll just freelance for a little while.
Yeah.
So I was a freelancer and realized much later, many years later, all the skills I learned in that little time frame are the reason why I'm fine taking risk now. And I don't think I would say yes to doing this. I don't think I would have said yes if that had not happened.
Yeah.
Because I would have just been on my little path, and I never considered that there were other options.
Yeah.
And so I think so many of us fall into that
Yeah.
and don't even know all of the like wide world of options that are available to us. But when I start talking to especially students who are, still young folks who are trying to figure out what they want to do and see this couple of little elements of like problem solving, they have this desire, this curiosity to figure out ways to solve problems, whatever that is, to like, it's almost people who enjoy puzzles.
Right.
And then people who have grit. And if the folks who come and talk to us about getting into technology, if they have those two things, they're going to be fine.
It doesn't matter where they came from.
It does not matter where they came from. It does not, like, if you have those two things, then that's the best indicator of their success. So we're just trying to help them figure out which learning style, which path, what timeline they have. All those factors are part of that kind of figuring out what the right path is.
How are people finding you and Bill and all these opportunities? Because it sounds like there's as long as they get access, there's a lot of opportunity. But how do they see you?
How do they find us?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of word of mouth. The software development industry, the people who work as programmers and developers and anything kind of adjacent to that, those folks it's a really cool industry. Like 99% of them I've ever met and work with are so willing to help more people get into the industry.
Yeah, it's because they see there's so many jobs that
There's so many jobs. And I mean, I was just at my office last week, I think it was Friday, and one of our alumni from the code school was just walking through. He'd stopped by, and I was just like, oh, how are you doing? How's it going? And he said, I've never been so happy.
Aww.
And you get this sense of these folks who are they're happy and they're content and they make great money and they have some freedom and flexibility. And so there's just this desire to like get more people in to see that this is available. And so word of mouth is a big kind of path for us.
Yeah, stimulator.
Thank you. I couldn't think of my words. And then, really we're well connected with the Department of Ed, with, some school systems. There's in our state, I mean, South Carolina, it really is pushing computer science forward. It's not perfect yet, but there's at least this foundational understanding that this is going to be important. This is the future. And so even if not every school, not every teacher who is trying to teach and equip students in computer science fundamentals, at least South Carolina is, requiring a computer science credit in order to graduate. And they're really trying. There's only a handful of states that have even made that a requirement yet.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's great, right?
Yeah.
So,
I was actually thinking the opposite. Like, what?
Right?
Yeah. I was like,
That's only a handful.
It's really pretty crazy that, South Carolina is not known as this sort of forward-thinking, educational, future-thinking place necessarily in the rankings and all these things. But you can see it and think about it holistically. We are this business-friendly, economic development strong state. And if this is where the future is, then of course we should be forward-thinking when it comes to computer science and all the related fields that come out of that. And so we are connected with, some schools, some school systems. We're very well connected with the Department of Commerce and our kind of regional workforce folks. And so it kind of comes from all directions. But we're still figuring it out too, because, my hope is that there will be a time when this organization is not needed, right? Because our educational system would be equipping folks for all these jobs.
Basically, what you're doing being fused as part of the school curriculum.
Exactly. And that industry just moves so quickly.
Yeah.
And our educational system is great, but it's hard to kind of move as quickly as that industry. Right?
Yeah.
And that's not a knock on our educational system. It's just
the structure.
we got to have
Yeah.
we got to have
well,
it
I think
from all
it's
angles.
the public and private partnership and
Yes.
and philanthropy kind of coming in
Yes.
in parallel to kind of go how do we move along?
That's right.
Because some don't, as you said, doesn't move as fast as the other.
Right. I do think that kind of public-private partnership and this idea of kind of social entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And we talk to so many startup companies, and a lot of those are tech, not all of them, but they need the talent too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all struggling for workforce.
Yes. Yes.
So we are unfortunately out of time. It went.
I was going to ask one more question though.
Yeah.
So, as part of your journey, as a founder and female founder, and part of that, what has been your biggest kind of oh shit moment?
The most important question.
It is the most important question. that you would go, man, if I would have known this.
Well, the pandemic is like the biggest, to me, the fact that we got through it, the fact that we continued. We were such a young organization when that hit. And at the time, we were doing a lot of in-person, classes and information sessions.
I didn't even think about that. Like, how did you
we had
pivot
to
out of
very
that?
quickly pivot, and very quickly navigate the PPP and all the systems that were.
Wow.
It was just, I was pregnant at the time. And
so good
Throw
times
that
there.
on top.
I had, good times
Little
there.
cherry on top.
I was pregnant and had a 3-year-old at home. And so, that whole story of like, we're all at home and here we are navigating all this kind of small business and all this help, and then changing up our model very quickly and our staff. And, so of course, like we can't change that. It's part of our story now. But that forced us to get stronger and to figure out a lot of things and figure out what was
I think
important.
it proved the nimbleness and the agility of your value statement,
Right.
So
probably just
congrats.
helped us solidify some of that.
That's true.
But I mean, we'll never come across anything quite as challenging as that probably
Let's
was.
hope not.
Knocking on the wood.
So our audience is obviously founders, founder-led companies, and so what's the best way for those folks to reach out to you, for the resources as they're building their businesses?
Yeah,
or
anyone
growing.
I love sharing stories, and I do not have it perfect. Like, I don't have it figured out, but I'm huge open book because that's what helped me is other folks. So buildcarolina.org is our website. I build it, and so please give it, some grace because I work with all these amazing developers.
Oh, you are walking the talk.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But we have built out a little bit of like our media center. And so my contact information is there. I'm happy to share anything that might be helpful for any other founders.
Awesome. And for founders who want more chaos in their lives.
That's right. So you can find and listen or watch this podcast on your favorite podcast platforms. Or you can go to our website, orangewhip.com, and look at our digital magazines, which are in 3 local markets and the 3 South Carolina markets. Or you can watch the Hello Chaos podcast videos or listen.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And they're really beautiful.
Oh,
Well, thank you. Yeah.
And we got to give props to John back there, who's our producer here at Pronk Studio.
Yeah.
It's been a nice home.
It's been a nice home.
A good home. So thank you so much, Leah. It's great to meet you in real life. I guess we met on Zoom, I think.
Yes, as we all have lately. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank y'all.
We appreciate it. Thank you.